look at the pool. There's Dave Ambler. See the 7-man in the St Paul's.
Attention.
We'll talk more about these crews as they go down. Remember going off the start at Henley, Tom?
I do, particularly when you're schoolboy years. This is just the pinnacle of the season, and all your other racing is 6 lanes. You can just focus on what you're doing. You don't have to worry about the other crews so much. Here it gets personal. Here it's just one other crew. You're named competitor for the day, and when you get on the start line, it gets tense. And particularly all the crowds, you're not used to having all those people on the side. That's the distraction.
Well, 5 of this St Paul's crew. We see Fred Davison, the stroke man of last year's victorious 8. Well, he stroked this year. He rode at 4 in last year's 8, but Fred and Dave Ambler behind him. Well, we're looking there at the stroke of the Abingdon crew, Stuart Pearson, and behind him, Rory Fisher. And I was talking with Ali Brown, Tom, the Abingdon coach, just before they won. He said, look, what's the character of this crew, Ali? And he said they're feisty. We're a developmental crew. We know we're up against it, against the might of St Paul's, but we're going to give it a real go, and it looks like they are doing early on.
Yeah, I mean, that's the attitude you've got to say. You've not got too many options. You can't just sit back and see how the race develops. If you're the underdogs, you've got to take it out and try and put some pressure on and upset your competitors' rhythm early on. But I think looking at St Paul's, even though they're a bit close to the booms there, just the pattern, they look quite stable. They got into their rhythm. They look quite controlled. There's a good picture of the stroke there, and he just had a good calm picture, looking down above his cocks, and just a nice early rhythm that they've pushed into, and you can see that rhythm is now carrying them forward to about half a length. Westminster at this point, they're going to have to respond a little bit early, make sure Abingdon, make sure they don't lose touch just early on. It's important to keep in that early stage, but yeah, it's St Paul's tough opposition.
So 5 of this crew won this event last year, famously beat Westminster, who were on for the triple in a fantastic final, coached by Bobby Thatcher, and they're coxed, of course, by the same cox, Fred Birmingham. You can see he's back there. Tom, I always think that Bobby coaches his crew to row in a very sympathetic way, a bit like, you like to row, or you did row in the 4, not too much aggression on the front end, sweeping through. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think it's always a tough balance. You always want to race hard and be aggressive, but for me it was, always comes down to good time. You can only put your power down if you're loose and relaxed is the best way to. Certainly for me, in the way I was brought up rowing at King's, then on to Cambridge, and yeah, looking at the St Paul's, it's a nice focused, solid pattern. It's confident, it's sitting up tall, and it just means you can then just focus on putting down your power in this nice, easy, fluid, moving rhythm. And I think that's what St Paul's have got into a solid pattern there. You can see it's just trucking along. Westminster a little bit more bubbly. You can see the boat twitching a little bit more, a little bit cut at the back end, perhaps having to just chase a little bit. But they've got to race. That's the only option they've got to do. They're up against a top opposition. They've got to be on the red line, and so it's always going to be a little bit more touch and go.
I know it's those pink blades that's doing your head in, Tom, but it's Abingdon. Westminster here, one of the favourites. Yeah. If you're wondering why Abingdon perhaps are not more competitive against St Paul's, bearing in mind that Abingdon have won this event in 2011, 12 and 13. Well, the top 4 Abingdon boys are here racing in the quadruple sculls event, so this really is a young crew, a development crew from Abingdon, and they've been very competitive early on in this race. Bobby Thatcher, he's been through a little bit of a torrid time. He was a long way behind the St Paul's 8, behind the top 2, Westminster and Eton, Tom, at national schools. Maybe it was a bit laney at the course there, but since then he's a bit controversially taken one of his J16s out, put them in this 8, and he now reckons they've really got a lot of momentum, and it does look like they're showing it now.
Yeah, I think it's always a tough call when you've got a very promising individual coming up who is a little bit younger, and particularly at that J16 sort of mark. Do you bring them up into your senior squad? Because that can disrupt the other years. But for the school, for trying to win events, then there's always the argument you put your best crew out. And so I can remember my years, we had John Brownlee, who was J16, we put him into the senior 8, and it was the right decision. He was the best athlete. You just got to be very conscious of the next follow-on years. You don't lose unity in your squad coming through. That's the important bit.
I just heard the umpire warning St Paul's, and you can see that their cocks Fred Birmingham has responded to John Hedger, the umpire, old boy of Hampton School, actually, Tom. Used to teach him, I think he took up rugby in his last year, actually, but he's one of the mainstays of rowing now. And we have had a disqualification here this morning in rather controversial circumstances. The head of the umpires commission here, Boris Rankov, deemed that Sydney University interfered with Oslo, and all the umpires will be aware of that, and they won't want that to happen again. But it seems like there's no danger of a clash in this race.
No, I think there's a good margin that's opened up now. I think you don't. It's, you know, the leading crew. You don't want to be pushing over and giving bad water down to Abingdon. Yeah, it's a strong pattern. They can just move away.
He's done it again. I mean, wouldn't you want in the university boat race? I mean, wasn't that the stuff of boat races, clashes, and you know, washing crews down? I mean, but it's so they're not really being so nice, are they, to Abingdon? You're saying?
Well, I think if you're the Cox, you also don't want to be getting over to the booms too much either. I think there is just on the borderline there. They're just almost creeping over where you've got a bit of overlap. I think if you're Abingdon, yeah, you'd feel a little bit annoyed if your blades are having to pick up dirty water. So St Paul's is certainly on the line. You don't want to be any closer over. And yeah, rightly so, they've been warned again, I think, moving back over.
You can see John Hedger there. He's got his Hampton School blazer on, I think, and he's got the white flag out. And Fred Birmingham is moving over. He will have been aware, perhaps, of the disqualification. I mean, St Paul's a pretty savvy streetwise crew. Their coach, Bobby Thatcher, is very savvy in streetwise. The Abingdon Cox, I think he's raising his hand. I mean, if you're going to be, if you're Cox in the Abingdon crew, Vlad sorry, I'm saying Fred Birmingham, he's the Abingdon Cox. Sorry, Vlad Saigu. But my name's mixed up between Abingdon and St Paul's. So Fred Birmingham, the Abingdon Cox, raising his hand, perhaps to make, well, maybe appeal at the end of the race that they were washed down. So Vlad Saigu, my mistake, the St Paul's Cox, has really got to get back on station. Be interesting to see whether Abingdon do object at the end of this race. What do you reckon, Tom?
Well, it's worth a try, but in my view, I think the race was probably over by any point of there being an overlap and causing
Let's look.
negative
Abingdon
speed.
finished now, and I heard in my ear from the producer that Fred Birmingham, who was the Abingdon School Cox, was putting his hand up. Vlad Saigu puts his hand back. John Hedger, the umpire, is waiting to see if there are any objections. None forthcoming, and they're just drifting past us. Fred Birmingham doesn't put his hand up, so the umpire will probably raise a white flag for that race. There's John Hedger. I'm not sure. He might go up and have a word with St Paul's and the Cox. You know, he might go and have a word with Vlad Saigu, the St Paul's Cox. No, they've paddled off, haven't they? I think he's saying he's going to talk to them about the race. So it's not done yet. So he wants an objection from the Abingdon crew because he did frequently warn St Paul's, perhaps thought it was unsporting, and he's asked them to raise a hand so he can really explain. I guess probably St Paul's were quite a way ahead, and he's going to go and have a word with the St Paul's crew, but I think he will raise the white flag to indicate the verdict. But John Hedger will go and have a word with the St Paul's Cox, Vlad Saigu, probably for not responding to his instructions. OK, so that's that race done. You saw the verdict. St Paul's School beat Abingdon School. Let's go down for the next race.